This is Humans of Non-League, a podcast about the people who live and love football outside the spotlight. My name is Chris Nee, and this week's human will be a familiar name to fans of the Isthmian League and beyond. Gavin Rose is the longest serving manager at Dulwich Hamlet, having passed a decade in the job in 2019. A former player with Wimbledon, Charlton Athletic, QPR, Southend United and more, he guided Hamlet to promotion for the first time in 2013 and has been instrumental in the club's rise back to non-league prominence. Gavin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Listeners to my previous episodes will already know that you're a Peckham lad. Is there any particular club that enjoys more support than others in that district?
I think our club outside of professional football is probably the best supported. In most of non-league, we compare with probably the top attendances throughout non-league, let alone locally. And obviously that's been built up over the past years.
Who's the biggest sort of professional club in terms of support in the area?
I guess would say Crystal Palace would be the local big team, which would probably have the biggest support. Obviously, they're doing the best in the South London teams at the moment as well, in terms of how high up they are. So obviously, sometimes it does go by what team's doing really well, but I think Palace has probably got the biggest following at present.
Who do you support?
I support Liverpool as a boy, not just now because they're doing quite well, but I support Liverpool as a boy. And obviously, you always look out for them because that's just a habit. But as you get older and you obviously trying to do well for yourselves, you probably pay less attention to the team that you supported as a boy because you're more engrossed in what you're trying to do yourself,
Were there Liverpool midfielders that caught your eye when you were younger?
John Barnes was my sort of hero when I was young. I liked the way he played and quite a skillful player and stuff. So a lot of the boys on my estate sort of idolised him really.
How did you first get into playing organised football? Was that through school or a local club?
Organised football, yeah. I played football on the estates, which wasn't organised, and we played in our primary school. And I think that was probably the first time we had anything sort of structured. Played against a few other local schools, and then it sort of carried on from there where a few friends had been playing at Sunday League teams, which I didn't know much about at the time. And then got invited down and then sort of carried on from there.
Before we get on to management, which is where I want to focus most of our conversation, you have a very respectable CV as a player, both in league football and in non-league. Do you consider yourself to have had a successful playing career?
No, not really. A lot of the clubs I was attached to, professional football was sort of my youth career. And then I played a lot of non-league football afterwards. And if I was being honest with myself, I don't think I really realised the potential that I showed as a young player. I had quite a few bits of injuries along the way as well. So never really, I don't think ever really got the best out of myself as a player, which kind of helped me on my journey into coaching, to be honest with you, because I sort of thought I still had something to give to the game. And maybe that was trying to help others realise their potential or get as much out of them as I could.
If I asked you to pin your reputation on one season or achievement as a player, what would that have been?
It's hard to say. I mean, obviously over the years, I've had some successful years, getting promotion with a few clubs. I'd say there's probably individual games that I remember more so, but I think my time at Gravesend and Northfleet, where they are now known as Ebbsfleet, was probably the best in terms of a group of lads, a good management team, and a successful period in the club's history. So I think that's the time that I'd remember probably the most in terms of consistently progressing as a player and a person, but also being around a group that stretched me and the team did really well as well.
What style of a midfielder were you in those days?
Always liked to sort of get on the ball and pass it. I could dribble as well. I wouldn't say I was one who really cared about tackles, but if I had to, I would. But I wasn't great at that side of the game. Probably let myself down at times with off the ball. But on the ball, I was pretty comfortable on it and happy to keep the team sort of ticking along and take the ball in tight areas and stuff like that.
Did you get on with your gaffers?
I think I might have been quite frustrating for a lot of my gaffers if I look back on it, to be honest with you, because I think I came across quite laid back as a player. My passion for football is very, very high, and probably a lot of gaffers probably would never have known that until maybe years later seeing me in the dugout myself. Probably came across as someone who was quite laid back and maybe not as interested as I probably should have been, but I was. That's just my outward appearance, but I obviously love the game, but sometimes your body language doesn't always display what's really going on inside. So I think sometimes I might have been a little bit frustrating to managers I played with.
You're now an experienced manager yourself with some serious achievements under your belt. What do you think it is about your character that has made you such a good fit for that job?
I think My upbringing in and around the area I grew up in was that if you want anything, you got to work hard for it and you got to earn it. Nothing gets given to you. I never get tired of winning. Obviously, hate losing, but I feel like I've got sort of characteristics that will never get too high, never get too low, and always try and think about the next game rather than rest on my laurels or even get too down. I think management is a very topsy-turvy sort of job because you can be so high one minute and so low the next. And it's about managing your emotions as much as managing players, because there are times where you really can feel low, and there are times where you feel really high, but you got to remember you got another game around the corner. And I think my upbringing gave me the sort of characteristics that, you never rest on your laurels and you never get too high, but you also show fight when you're in a tough situation to get back out of it.
I've spoken a bit to the manager of my own club about his role as a coach in terms of developing people as well as players. You've got yourself to a much higher level now. Would you say that you now have to develop players to be winners first and foremost, while the people are players that you bring in and expect to have looked after themselves already?
It definitely changes the higher you go up the pyramid. We now are getting players who not only have played at the level we're at the moment, have played maybe at a level above, have played league football, have been let go by professional clubs at maybe 20, 21, and are trying to kickstart their career as well. So we're getting a different type of character, different type of player, different type of experience. But they have to be ready. Like you say, the nurturing aspect is still there, and it's still something that we don't want to turn away from, because I think it's important that players have a chance to grow in men's football. But you've got probably less time to nurture the talent and nurture the person than you maybe would have in the league below or the league below that, because the league's more unforgiving. Mistakes are punished more. Technical and tactical awareness is much more higher. So it just means that players probably will not get away with as much as they could in the leagues below, and they could have more time to develop and would be let off by some mistakes that you can get away with a league below or two leagues below. So definitely you need them to be a little bit closer to, not ready-made, but just a little bit closer. You're trying to add that little bit more onto them so they become even stronger and better players.
You've had Junior Caddy with you along the way. How do the two of you work together after such a long time, and how are the responsibilities divided?
Yeah, we've been working together since we both started the academy. And firstly, I think you have to respect the person you're working with, and there's a real healthy respect. We're family friends. We mix in the same social circles as well, and I think that is actually quite important as well, especially in maybe the bad times as well. But the good thing is on a more technical level that we push each other and we ask each other questions, and we ask questions of ourselves and stuff like that to continually grow. So it's not a relationship where we rest on our laurels or we think we've cracked it. We continually try and have a growth mindset and challenge each other to keep doing better and improving.
Was Beckenham Town your first senior management job?
It was.
How was that?
Great time. We brought over a lot of the boys who'd been in our academy, sort of 18, 19-year-olds, quite unknown in terms of senior football. And maybe only had maybe two, three senior players around a really young group. But the group were very good technically and were willing to sort of listen and learn and stuff like that. And we really, really took that league by storm and lost, and I think by goal difference at the end of the season. But a really great time for me, because I was still able to play some games with the team as well, and I enjoyed even playing with them as much as managing them. But it was a good group, and probably a bit closer in age to me, so we could have a bit of banter, a bit more banter, and it was just it wasn't so personal for the boys. They were sort of young men in a sense, so it was a great time. Really good club as well. And really, in a sense, the best sort of job to start off with.
Were you doing badges and stuff at the time?
Yeah, I'd already done my, I think, level 2, and I was on my level 3 when I first started at the time at Beckenham. So yeah, I was already on the way to doing badges. You
returned to Dulwich Hamlet in 2009 with the team at step 4. How did that opportunity come about? I think being the figure that you are around the club, you must have been an obvious choice to an extent.
For a short period, I'd done a caretaker role at Fisher Athletic, and they were ground share and they were the tenants at Dulwich at the time. And they were in the Conference South, were quite heavily backed at the time. But then the money had run out and they had asked me to sort of plug the gap. So I'd done that and kept the team sort of up and stuff like that. And then after that, I went to Beckenham. But the owner at Dulwich at the time had noticed what I'd done at Fisher and then noticed what I'd done at Beckenham. I used to speak to him on and off, and his words were that Dulwich were basically just existing. So I approached him at the end of the Beckenham season because I knew that wasn't going to go any further because there was not allowed to sort of go up in terms of the ground grading, and just said to him, look, I think I'm ready to, have a go at taking the job. And to be fair, he was well up for it. We brought a young team over again to try and emulate what we did at Beckenham, but we took a little bit longer to do it because the level was, again, like we spoke about earlier, was a bit harder and more unforgiving. So it took a little bit of time for us to sort of bed down what we wanted to do. But with time, we started to show some progress.
Yeah, serious progress as well. So a few years into that job, you reached a couple of promotion playoff finals and missed out. How do you go about motivating that team to then continue their progress and get themselves promoted? Because those setbacks were presumably quite difficult to stomach.
Yeah, they were. I mean, the first playoff we lost to Leverett, we were winning 3-1 with only not a lot of time left. We ended up losing 4-3. So that was, having not really been in that situation before, that was pretty tough because I felt really sick for the players because we'd been on such a long run of doing well. We probably weren't supposed to be in that final because I think we're mid-table, sort of with about 4 months to go. And just carried on winning games. So I was so gutted for the players because we'd built up a great team spirit and stuff like that. And then, we started again, and the season after, we was actually a force in the league that year. We started to win more games than not, and people started to expect us to do well. So we established ourselves in the league that year, and we got to the playoff and lost again against Bognor, and again that was gutting. And at that point, I thought, that's my last game at the club. That's how I felt at the time. And in the summer, there was a lot of back and forward. We ended up deciding to give it another go. And then I think we only made 2 or 3 tweaks to the team, but one in particular, I think we signed Erhan Ostuma, and he was almost like a talisman, just that little missing link to the group that we had the year before, and we then pipped Maidstone to the title.
So you get up, you're regularly in the playoffs at Step 3 as well after that, and got promoted that way in 2018?
Yeah.
Into the National League South. That team must have had something about it. You've to make that jump over a course of years, 2 divisions with the same manager. That team must have had some players that you're really fond of.
Oh yeah, the tough thing with management is you get attached to players, especially ones that have served you really well and done so well for the club over a period of time. And there's times where you have to, not continue with some players, and you really want to, but you also have to have that head on about, what the next challenge is. And the team that eventually took us up in the 2018 season, we lost Alassani, who's back with us now, to Coventry. It was a bit of a talisman for us. We lost a few really key centre-backs in Anthony Achimpong and Ricky Howes, just because we weren't able to offer them the deals that they probably deserved and other clubs sort of did. And because our club was in a bad position, we went up and not even owning our own ground at the time. We were playing at Tooting. So a lot of teams that knew that we were destabilised and sort of capitalised on some of our assets. And it just meant that 1 or 2 changes just meant that we were a little bit threadbare and we'd lost that continuity because I think that team, maybe one or two changes would have made an impact in the Conference South straight away, to be quite honest with you. But the fact that we were unable to keep the core of those boys together and then add to that just made life a little bit harder. And obviously you go to a new league and you start thinking the league's a lot harder than what it is at times, just because you're a little bit disjointed as well,
Showing the league a bit too much respect.
Yeah, at times, yeah.
What sort of pool of players are you looking at when you get to Step 2 level? Because you've had a career with Dulwich where you would have been having a lot of local boys in the side. Do you start looking much, much further afield?
Not particularly. I just think Step 2 is just a little bit more serious, where you got players who have to make that little bit more sacrifice personally to be assets at that level. The fitness levels are improved, which means that the players would have to take a lot of responsibility in terms of making sure they stay fit and recover well and stuff like that. And you just have to try and sign better mentalities, not so much better players, technically better players, but just players that take more responsibility in looking after themselves. That's what I found. And what I've found is that it isn't so much about the quality of player. It's more about the player that's willing to take the sacrifice to looking after their bodies well, to being able to recover, to play game after game after game at a much more intense pace. Obviously, quality is important, and the quality is probably better, but I think it's just that professionalism is gone up a little bit, and you're looking at players still in the same area and maybe further afield, but just that ones that have got that application to be able to do that.
How about you? What is different about your job as a manager from a step 4 to a step 2 day to day?
Organisation has to be much better in terms of preparing for opposition. Everyone in the league has videos of the last opponent's game. So the game you're about to play, you would have got their last game and vice versa. You then have the opportunity to do some analysis on it, send it to your team, and show the team, then prepare throughout the week leading up to that game. So I think prep, we done it a lot on the A-licence courses, but when you do it in real life and with real people, that's when it becomes a lot more, not so much challenging, but all the theory goes out the window, and you have to get it right, So I think that part has been good because it's enjoyable. You realise that every manager's doing their best to get that little extra yard and get that little bit of advantage. And if you're lazy, your team could lose just because you're lazy and you haven't done your preparation and you ain't done your research on who all the players are and what you could possibly do to get a win,
How often are you training on a typical week during the season?
Well, if we had a Saturday to Saturday with no midweek, we can train 3 mornings. We've got a young group in this year, and boys have just been released from professional clubs. So the step to going into mornings is pretty ideal for them, whereas they'd probably struggle with doing a night session because it's very different to what they've been used to. So we've got a group that, we spoke about the type of mentality. You've got guys who sort of see themselves as footballers first in the main. And so we're doing 3 mornings. But very rarely do we have 3 mornings in a week. We're playing Saturday, Tuesday. Obviously, we know the pandemic, what it's done to the league, and the fixtures are sort of back to back. So we may have 2 sessions a week, and those sessions are really very light because we're just recovering and preparing for the next game. So we don't really get as much contact with the group in time to do stuff, put things into practice as much as you'd like, because you don't want to flog the boys because they've got to get ready for another game. It takes a bit of time to recover from a 90-minute game at this level.
The pandemic has kind of split step 1 and step 2 off from the rest of non-league in a lot of ways. So you've played a lot more football than the rest of us. How has the pandemic affected your progress as a club over the last 9-10 months?
I think if you look at it on the business side of things, it's been very difficult for us to make a clear plan because there's not been a lot of great direction for us to follow from. Not knowing whether it would be funded if there was no crowds. That was very, very late decisions being told for us. Then we've got the crowds back last week, and then it looks like we're not going to have the crowds again. So budgeting for a group of players is very difficult, and planning ahead is very difficult. Venue hire has been very difficult in terms of training because obviously facilities and stuff like that, no one doesn't really want to risk COVID breakout. So it's been very up and down, but I think as a manager, you've got to learn to basically navigate these things and not make a big deal out of them and basically make the best of the scenario, and also make your players not make excuses for the scenarios we're in. Because to be quite honest with you, every team faces them is who faces them the best,
Dulwich Hamlet being one of the best supported teams in non-league is going to be a big hit, isn't it, in terms of playing behind closed doors? You must notice that week by week.
Definitely. I mean, we probably got the biggest hit to a few clubs' amusements in terms of not being able to have our support in. But, I think the club were very brave. And still set out in a way that we never spent loads of money this year in terms of our budget, but we still gave a budget which was going to give us a chance to compete in the league without knowing what funding we were going to get, or if we were going to get any supporters in at all. So bravery from the club was great and very resourceful as well. And to be fair, if we do get the supporters back on a permanent basis, we know that in the long run we'll have the last laugh in a sense.
Are you happy with in negotiations with players this year about bringing them into the club, keeping them at the club and so on? Has the players' attitude been understanding of what's been going on?
It has, actually. I think a lot of players have, at the start, they obviously try and get to the best club and the highest levels possible and probably get the best pay packet they can probably get, agents alike. And I think once they realise the message is pretty consistent from every club, that, you know, it's a bit different times and the money isn't probably so easy and stuff like that. Players screw their loaf quickly and agents screw their loaf quickly, and good agents advise players, look, get yourself in the right club and don't worry about the money so much, and just worry about yourself being relevant and playing and doing well. So, you know, when maybe there's a bit more money to share around, you know, you'd be one of the first ones people will be looking for, you know.
You've hinted at this already. The club was exiled for a while and playing at Tooting and Mitcham. Tell us about that experience as the manager, because we know that things off the pitch haven't been as smooth as they might be, but from the outside, that was a bit of a shocking piece of news, to be fair.
To be honest, it was a culmination of probably my whole tenure at Dulwich. It happened. There's been so much upheaval in the background going on since I've been the manager. We had the gates locked several times, the stadium gates locked several times, and then someone coming and bailing us out at the last minute, and no one sort of found out about it publicly. But this sort of unrest was happening, and we always kept it away from the squads and the players we'd been managing. But this time it had overspilled, and you know, we had the feeling that this was going to overspill and it was going to get a little bit nasty. And our main thing as a club was to try and make sure that the players always, their wages were always met, and we was always able to provide games for them. Them actually getting up and being promoted and maintaining their form was remarkable from that group, literally. Great mental strength from them, not knowing if they were going to get paid in a month, and not putting that as, you know, as the be all and end all, and putting their, you know, achievements first ahead of that was unbelievable. I mean, the club met the wage somehow. They always do. And, you know, the players weren't let down in that respect, but they didn't know, and they went into it with courage. And it was a tough time, but it was a time that I'll always look back on with fondness, because those players showed me, you know, what football really should be about. You know, at the end of the day, I think everyone starts out in football because you're passionate about the game and because you want to achieve and do really well. And I think sometimes the generation we're in now sometimes lose sight of what you're actually in the game for. And some of them are losing careers because of that, because they lost the sight of it, you know. So that team I look back on and with fondness, because they did remarkably well. And the directors of the club at the time, Tom Cullen and Liam Hickey, were remarkable, very, very good, hard-working, along with many other volunteers at the club at the time. They done a great job to keep the club alive.
It ended well with promotion. Did you hit the ground running when you moved to Imperial Fields?
No, we had a bit of a dodgy time there, to be honest with you. When we didn't, it was weird because the pitch, no disrespect, the pitch wasn't playing like Champion Hill. It was.
Yeah, I've played on both.
Yeah, well, you probably know. Yeah. It wasn't great, and that was one of the only times the players were sort of half making excuses, because they'd have bad touches and they'd look over to us and go, "Oh, it was the pitch." Do you know what I mean? And we were going, "Come on, get on with it." But in fairness, there was a big difference, and it took us a few games to get going over there. And then once we did, we got ourselves over the line with some really good performances and some good, good bits of determination from the squad, and we finally got there. You know,
there's a bit of a rivalry between the two clubs. How did you find life with those landlords?
I had played for Tooting for a really brief period, and I didn't really get the sense of a rivalry when I played for Tooting. When I came back to Dulwich, it was made abundantly clear that the two clubs don't get along. And they reminded me that I got sent off for Dulwich in a game against Tooting. And to be fair, it was a bit of a spicy game. But when I went to Tooting, there was no sort of real talk of it. So I forgot all about it. And then when I went back as a manager, I think we weren't doing that great this season, but we played Tooting. They was like, "Look, we need to win this game." I was thinking, so what? Like, we need to win every game. They were like, no, we need to win this game. And then I've got to realise there is a real big rivalry there. And it's great, actually. Those games are really good for the players. We've had some good games against them and won, and with some bad games, and the players really start to hear what the fans think of them if we don't perform. Which is very rare for Dulwich Hamlet, because the supporters are very, very good. Probably too good, to be honest with you. Very good and very supportive of the team at all times, really.
Tell me about that first game back at Champion Hill.
Yeah, great. We played Eastbourne, which was our last opponent, actually, at home. But yeah, we played Eastbourne. It was a great day just to see everyone back out there. The pitch wasn't great, but no one really cared. We ended up winning. I think Nyron could have scored 2 goals. I know he scored a header, which was rare. But it was great to see everyone back. Everyone seemed to be happy and smiling. The community basically really benefited from us being back, and you could see that. So yeah, it was great. It was great feeling, to be honest with you. So all that fighting and all that, back and forward politics that had nothing to do with really football, and it was great just to be back playing football at Dulwich.
Is it surreal now to think back at a time when you were playing that short period away?
It is, actually, to be honest with you. It's something that, you'd heard threats about this stuff beforehand, but you just thought, all right, whatever, it never happened. But when it actually did, I can only imagine what the supporters who'd been at the club for many years must have been feeling. They must have been thinking their club's going to, not be existing, because the threat was very real. It was very real. But in a sense, I think it's made this club stronger. It's galvanised the club and the community to make sure that, this never really happens to the club again. And I think the club was always in a position where it was a bit vulnerable to that sort of thing happening since I've been there. And I feel like the amount of people who have stepped in to help and stay on board, I don't think the club will be in that position again. And I'm hoping they never will be,
Do you consider Dulwich Hamlet to be a fashionable club?
Yeah, I've heard it being described that way. For me, I don't really get involved in the labels. I've heard a lot of labels attributed to the club and the support and stuff like that. But for me, we get the local community come down, they come out in numbers and support, and they support really well. And our job is to try and do as best as we can for them and win games. And that's as far as I really take it. I've heard a lot of the the different labels that, people label the club and the support. And to be honest with you, I don't think you can sort of put one label on the club. We've got very diverse type of crowd, different backgrounds, different everything really. And one thing I would say is this: you do get a community feel when you go to the club. You get a sense of belonging. I've had family and friends come and watch games, and they love the experience. So I think that's the key thing.
When things get back to normal, what are the ambitions of the club over the next few years?
I think the fact that we won the planning application, if we can just see that through and get a new stadium, and this is me talking more as a Dulwich Hamlet supporter, I think that will give the club stability. Forgetting what level the club is playing at, just the stability of knowing that everything's in the club's hands. The club can then start to make plans beyond one season. They can engage the community a lot more away from the football club, the football pitch, because I think the club has got such a pull that it's able to influence so many people in the community. So I think it'll be a really big thing if we actually get to the point where the club has a new stadium, because I think it will affect many people in the community. Obviously, the main thing of the football club is a football club and a football team. And then, I think it even gives the club an opportunity to go up a level or two as well and compete. But that's the cherry on the cake. But I think if it can influence many lives in the community, youth and even adults, I think that's even more powerful.
Are there any players that you've brought through over the 11 years now who've moved up 2, 3, 4 divisions and you can look at as a real source of pride in your ability as a coach and as a manager?
Sometimes they move 2 leagues and then they move again and move again. So I don't think I can take the credit for that. I think we've had a part to play in their journey, moving from Dulwich to the next step, whatever that may be. But to be quite honest with you, the real work comes from those players. They're the ones who have got to continually challenge themselves and continually ask questions of themselves to keep getting better and keep improving in order to stay at those levels or even go beyond. So yeah, definitely you get a sense of pride when you see, like, obviously at the moment currently we've got Ethan doing remarkably well at Brentford. He's one of the current boys who are doing really well. And, we spent a lot of time in Ethan's development. He stayed at Dulwich longer than people thought he should and would. But, him getting those games at the age he was, I think has made him so much game ready and battle hardened that, he's been able to, with his personality as well, been able to keep kicking on. But you watch Ethan and you do get a sense of pride and an achievement. But to be quite honest with you, he has to take all the real credit, because he's the one who's, like I said, he's been able to keep taking the challenges, keep learning, keep growing, and that's the real big challenge,
How about you? Have you had any interest from clubs higher up?
I've actually had a few more offers in this period. The period when we was in the Isthmian League didn't really get much at all. We had maybe one from a National League team who was in Isthmian, but didn't really get much at all. And in the first year going up, I had 3 or 4, and my decision was, not to leave the club because of the position the club was in, because I just felt that we needed some stability as a club and it would be the wrong time to move on. And this summer and even last year, we had a bit of interest as well. But, to be honest with you, I think there'll be a time when obviously I'll move on and the club will continue to grow without me. That time, I don't think has come. The opportunities weren't quite right, and I think the timing wasn't quite right. And whilst I'm at the club, I'm here to really see if I can continually help the club grow on and off the pitch, and we'll see where that takes us from there.
You will be aware of the kind of things that we say as fans about non-league. We like the sense of community, the feeling of belonging, all of that stuff. Does that reflect how players and managers respond to the experience as well?
To be honest with you, I think players, I don't know if they try not to, but they don't dial in too much to supporters, and I think they probably should do so, but they don't. I think they probably don't focus so much on that. They just focus on doing really well for themselves. As a manager, I think it's sensible for most managers to understand the culture of the club, culture of the level that we're playing at, just so you can then pass that onto the players. So I took a lot more interest in the club and supporters and what they think and feel and the culture as soon as I took over. But as a manager, you do, because you understand that you're trying to defend these supporters and you're trying to give them a bit of entertainment, and they want it done the right way. And players speaking to supporters are important. And, without that sort of hierarchy of maybe professional football, it becomes a little bit strained, and, the professionals are over there and the supporters are over the other side. I think in non-league football, you get that bit of engagement where everyone's sort of together really, in a sense, and there's no real hierarchy or anything like that.
Well, you've done a terrific job over the last decade and a bit. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
If you've enjoyed meeting Gavin, you'll like our other episodes too. Don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Humans of Non-League is a Sphinx Football production. Thanks for listening.